Good afternoon, good morning, greetings wherever you are across North America or further afield. Wonderful you can join us again for these quarterly special editions of the State of the American Traveller. This is where we take a deep dive into a specific area, the Traveller Segments Edition. We've been running it for a number of years, and we look at different segments of US leisure travellers in depth, both from the research perspective and joined by guest speakers. And we've got a wonderful lineup today of both our very good friends and future partners, and I'll be getting Erin to talk about that change in a moment, as well as guest speakers from St. Petersburg, Clearwater in Florida. So I'm delighted to be joined again by a very familiar face to you all. Erin Francis Cummings is President and CEO. We've been working together on this, Erin, for 12 plus 15 years.
I think we're at 15, Chris.
That's right. We'll be getting a gold watch any moment. And Erin will be presenting the research from the Traveller Segments Edition. This is now a monthly research piece, but we do these deeper quarterly special editions. I'll be passing over to Erin in a moment, and we're also delighted to be joined by Eddie Kirsch, who's digital producer at our very good friends at St. Pete Clearwater. He's actually joining us from the Florida Governor's Conference on Tourism, where he spoke this morning. Hello, Eddie. And Brian Horn, who's Vice President of a critical industry partner in St. Petersburg, Clearwater. They're actually the second largest independent brewery in the state of Florida. Brian's got 25 years experience in the industry, and Brian will be joining Eddie for a discussion about food tourism and foodie travellers. So we'll be looking at both the research and then some practical case study examples of how a destination markets, builds and enhances food and brewery tourism. So just a reminder, all the resources from today, so that's the recording, the research slides, and other resources will be available on this website right here, and as well on the Future Partners website. And a brief look at the agenda. So we'll kick it off with Erin. She'll do a brief introduction looking at the sort of current state of traveller sentiment. Then we're going to look at 3 traveller segments: affluent travellers, generations, of course, Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, and baby boomers, but we'll take the most time for a deep dive into self-described foodie travellers, which actually make up about half of all US leisure travellers. Then we'll be joined by Eddie and Brian to look at the food scene in St. Pete Clearwater, demonstrating practical examples of how a destination works with their industry to elevate and amplify food, brewery, and other cuisine-related tourism. Reminder, please ask any questions or share your comments in either the Q&A or the chat area. You might have resources or links to share yourself. And without further ado, I'm going to pass over to Erin. Thanks so much, Erin. And please present the latest edition of our Traveller Segments research.
Yes, I'm excited. Chris, are you all able to see the screen? Is it sharing?
Yes, we are. We're all
okay,
good.
Fantastic. All right. Well, if you've just joined us, thank you again for being here. Again, I'm Erin Francis Cummings, President and CEO of Future Partners, a company formerly known as Destination Analysts. We are a creative insights firm shaping winning strategies for travel, tourism, and hospitality leaders that capture hearts, minds, and market share. And it's my great pleasure to present this, the latest Travel Segments edition of the State of the American Traveler, our ongoing research that looks into how Americans are considering, experiencing, and consuming travel, conducted since 2006. And as someone who started their career in travel marketing, built a company to support travel marketers, and who's still such a sucker for very clever marketing, the Segments edition is my absolute favorite of these quarterly deep dives that we do in partnership with Miles. So let's get you up to date and familiar with some of the travel segments that are important to travel marketing strategies right now. In terms of our methodology, the State of the American Traveler Study is based on a monthly tracking survey that collects a minimum of 4,000 unique completed responses from American travelers. After the data is collected, it's weighted by geography and demographics, so it's reflective of the actual American traveling population. Today's findings reflect data we collected between July 18th and the 22nd, and they have a confidence interval of plus or minus 1.6%. But before we explore the characteristics of these traveler segments, it's important to share a macro view or context of the travel reality that they perceive themselves to be in. So first, we're going to take a top-level look at some of the latest trends in American travel sentiment and behaviors, and what this means for the upcoming fall season and beyond. Looking back always provides some great learning for us going forward. So with September here, let's do a rear view look at summer 2023. This summer, American travelers cited the high cost of travel as the biggest barrier to travel, followed by personal financial reasons and the high cost of gas. Nevertheless, 61% of American travelers reported taking at least one overnight trip this summer. Another 12% said they took an overnight trip overseas, while 1/3 traveled by a commercial airline for overnight trips, and 2/3 said they took a leisure day trip this summer. Let's look forward now. We also asked travelers to share their predictions about the next 12 months in order to gain deeper insight into their mindsets. And it's an exercise that we initially did back in January and repeated again. We found that over 1/3 of Americans predict that wildfires will be a problem in the Western US, which in light of what just happened in Lahaina, Maui, is a prediction that is very sadly coming all too true already. And our hearts are really with that community right now as they rebuild and grieve. On a more optimistic note, 26% of American travelers think that the next 12 months is going to be great for them personally. And 1/4 anticipate that domestic travel will become generally more frustrating, and that is up from 22% in January. Similar percentage expect that price gouging is going to become more common in the travel industry, and 23% still feel that labor shortages are going to plague the industry going forward. Looking at what's in store for fall, over half of Americans say they are prioritizing leisure travel in their budgets for the season. In fact, nearly 3/4 say they will take at least one leisure trip this fall. Among these travelers, 2/3 say one of these trips will be to visit friends or relatives. So I hope all of you out there are going to get ready to host. 28% of American travelers already have a leisure trip planned for this month of September, and a similar number say the same for October. And these stats have been on the rise since last month. All right, so now we're ready for the main event, travel segments. Let's dive right in. As Chris reviewed, on our agenda today, we'll be exploring the latest on affluent travelers, travelers by generation, and ending with a special deep dive into foodies and their travel behaviors. We'll run through demographic and psychographic characteristics, their outlook for travel, notable opinions, preferences, or behaviors, and their media consumption habits. So starting with affluent travelers, these are travelers defined here as those with a household income of $200,000 or more. Taking a look at some of the demographics of affluent travelers, we see that they tend to be urban coastal residents who are firmly established in terms of their finances, as well as their employment and their family status. In fact, 3/4 have a multi-income household, while a similar share are employed full-time. They're also significantly more likely than other travelers to be married and college educated. So in terms of their consumer habits, we see that they tend to be adopters of newer technology, with 39% seeking cryptocurrency payment options, over 1/3 saying they own a VR headset, and 1 in 5 saying they own an electric vehicle. They also prioritize travel experiences that focus on fitness and the outdoors, even more so than perhaps more expected luxury travel experiences and accommodations. We found that affluent travelers also tend to be more social and environmentally conscious travelers, who are also more inclined to show an interest in psychedelic tourism. Turning next to affluent travelers' outlook for the near term. This is pretty fascinating. Affluent travelers are actually less likely than other travelers to be daydreaming about their leisure travel. But that's probably because they are much more likely to actually be booking travel. Over 1/3 of affluent travelers reported that they made a travel reservation in the past week alone. In fact, affluent travelers are significantly more likely to anticipate traveling even more for leisure in the next year than they did in the past 12 months, 46.5% of them saying that, compared to just 27.1% of other travelers. Similarly, they are much more likely than other travelers to say they expect to spend more on leisure travel in the next year, 48% of them saying that, compared to just 29.6% of other travelers. They're also going to take more leisure trips. The average affluent traveler reports they will take 4.5 leisure trips in the next 12 months, thus likely vacationing more than once per quarter. 77.6% of affluent travelers say that leisure travel will be a priority for them in their budget in the next 3 months, compared to just about half of other travelers. And when we look at their expected travel budgets for the next year, the typical affluent traveler anticipates spending nearly 3 times more than other travelers, at an annual leisure travel budget of nearly $10,000. But keep in mind that affluent travelers are not necessarily just the kind of people you see in the hotel bar of the White Lotus. The majority of affluent travelers actually prioritize outdoor travel experiences with their families, and they enjoy destinations that have fun ways to be physically active. 2/3 say that traveling off the beaten path is appealing to them, and a large majority seek educational opportunities for their children as part of why they travel. So looking at how to reach these affluent travelers, when asked where they are most receptive to learning about new destinations, 4 in 10 affluent travelers actually selected email, making email the top marketing channel for this group. And affluent travelers are more likely to turn to more traditional planning resources compared to other travelers, in particular printed travel guides or lifestyle magazines at 29%, and travel agents or advisors at 22%. They're also significantly more likely than other travelers to utilize official destination marketing sources, particularly official destination websites at 35%, and official online visitor guides at 27%. But don't forget to tap into social. While email and traditional media are key channels to market to affluent travelers, they are also more likely, though, to turn to social media platforms, particularly Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, compared to other travelers.
Yeah, Erin, I just wanted to make a quick note, a reminder that we did a deep dive into luxury travelers in last year's edition of the Travelers segment. So we'll share the resources from that. Obviously, there's a significant overlap, but there's quite distinct differences between affluent travelers and luxury travelers. And just a further note, this is about 8 to 12% of US households. About 10 million US households have household incomes above 200,000, and there's been some interesting demographic shifts in where many of these households, or at least some of them, are living with the rise of remote work. So I'll share an article in the chat regarding those shifts.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Chris. And yeah, so it's a smaller portion of the population, obviously, but has huge desire to travel and clearly the financial resources. And then on the other side, with our luxury travelers, that was one of the key learnings you and I found digging into that last year, is that it's much more expansive. So there are a lot of people that want luxury travel experiences as part of their trip, but don't necessarily have the income threshold that we, stereotypically think of, but they still are seeking that out. So yes, very interesting, and check out those resources. Okay, and now that you're armed with the insights into affluent travelers, I'm going to share the latest travel trends and behaviors of the 4 major generations: Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, and Baby Boomers. So first, we're going to take a blast to the past. So 4 years ago, in 2019, we did our first in-depth profile of the Gen Z traveler, who were noted for their striking demographic diversity. At that point, they represented 12.8% of American leisure travelers and were full of travel optimism and seemingly budget. They reported even higher leisure travel budgets than baby boomers at that time, which we tended to joke was because they still remained partially on their parents' payroll. But Gen Z prioritized connectivity and food in their travel experiences. And they were more trepid about the outdoors back then, and more trepid about just generally exploration as travelers. And as I share the latest profile of our American traveling population by generation, you'll see interesting ways in which Gen Z has evolved as travelers and ways in which they still remain the same. But let's go even further back, now to 2016. This is a chart showing the resources American travelers had used in the past year to plan their trips. And we weren't even looking at Gen Z back then. But when I think of the definitive features of the millennial generation, I have Instagram travel and showing off travel on Instagram in my word cloud of millennial generation. But back in 2016, millennial travelers were as likely to use Twitter, now known as X, for trip planning, and twice as likely to use Facebook and group discount websites like Groupon as they were Instagram for trip planning. So anyway, it's always fun to take a trip down memory lane. Let's head back into the present now. Let me get my slide to move forward for you. There we go. In 2023, among the different generations, Gen Z is the most likely to be actively dreaming and thinking about travel in the past week at 57.6%. Gen Z is also the likeliest to be talking to others about a future trip. Over 40% of millennial and Gen Z travelers report having researched travel ideas online in the past week alone, notably more than Gen X and boomers. Looking at what kind of leisure travel most excites these generations, the 2 younger generations are clearly looking for romantic getaways. Interest in romance travel, sadly, seems to decline with age, but maybe just inspiration is needed from all you travel marketers out there. The desire for romantic travel also translates to greater excitement about kid-free multi-couple trips, with over 4 in 10 Gen Z and millennial travelers saying they are excited about this type of trip in the coming months, compared to less than 1 in 5 baby boomers saying the same. Wellness travel is also of strong appeal to Gen Z and millennial travelers, something that also appears to fall off for boomer-aged travelers. In terms of travel spending for each of these generations, as we've seen in the past, younger generations, particularly Gen Z, continue to be more sensitive to high travel prices, while baby boomers tend to be much more resilient in the face of inflation in consumer prices. However, despite their more negative response to high costs and inflation, the younger generations tend to be more financially optimistic, with over 4 in 10 Gen Z and millennial travelers saying they feel better off financially now than they were a year ago. They're also significantly more likely to anticipate continued financial improvement into the next year. Over 34% of millennial-age travelers say that now is a good time to spend on travel. 31% of Gen Z travelers and 27% of baby boomer travelers say the same, our Gen Xers really being the party poopers here about wanting to spend on travel right now. Over 55% of millennials say they will prioritize travel as a budget item in the near term. Fortunately, over half of travelers in all generations say that they will be prioritizing travel in their near-term budget. That being said, baby boomers just edge out millennials when it comes to having the biggest travel budgets for the next year. Average baby boomer travel budget of $3,745 for the next 12 months. Turning now to how travel marketers can reach these different generations, let's take a look at inclusivity in travel ads before we look at media consumption. We ask an agreement statement. I've noticed that travel advertisements usually do not reflect people like myself. Interestingly, millennial and Gen Z travelers were more likely to say that they do not feel that travel ads represent them. So there is an opportunity in travel marketing to make a greater proportion of travelers, particularly younger ones, and think back to those demographic and psychographic characteristics I shared with you, making them feel like they are being welcomed and included in travel. All right, let's look at how American travelers in the 4 generations responded to the question on which resources they would be most receptive to learning about new destinations to visit. No surprise, the top channel for reaching Gen Z with travel messaging is TikTok at 42.2%, a whopping 40 points higher than baby boomers. Instagram is a close second for Gen Z, and it's also an effective channel for reaching many travelers in other generations as well. Meanwhile, older generations were more likely, or most likely, I should say, to be receptive to websites that they find just searching around using search engines. And unlike Gen Z, older generations, including millennials, are more inclined to check their inboxes to learn about new travel destinations. Over half of Gen Z reported using online video to plan their travels in the past year, followed closely by nearly half of millennials saying that. Over a third of Gen X travelers report using online video to plan travel as well. As such, Gen Z, as well as millennials, are significantly more likely than their older counterparts to turn to digital influencers to plan their travels. Over 40% of Gen Z and nearly a third of millennials say they have used a digital influencer to plan travel in the last year. And mobile continues to be first among the majority of all generations, but particularly among Gen Z and millennial travelers. So to close out this segment, let's take a look at some of these generations' most used travel brands, as well as their top desired destinations. Each month we track usage of many major travel brands, and these are the top 5 most used among each generation. So starting with Gen Z, their top travel brands are Delta, American, Hilton, Hotels.com, and Best Western. For millennials, American Airlines edges out Delta, and a cruise line, American Cruise Line, actually ranks as a top travel brand for millennials, followed by Hilton and Hotels.com. American Airlines is also the top travel brand used by Gen X recently, followed by Southwest, Delta, Carnival Cruise Line, and Hilton. Similarly, American and Southwest top the list for our baby boomers, with Delta, United, and Marriott making up the remainder of the oldest generation's top travel brands. In addition, each month we ask an open-ended question to American travelers about where they most realistically want to take a trip in the next 12 months. Here are the top 5 desired domestic destinations for each generation. New York makes the top 5 for each generation, coming out number 1 for Gen Z and millennials. Similarly, for Florida, which comes out on top for boomers and Gen X. Gen X also has Orlando specifically in their top 5. California and Las Vegas also have appeal across generations. Texas makes the hot list for millennial age travelers, and Chicago actually unites Gen Z and baby boomers. And finally, for the top 5 international destinations, no matter what generation you are, Italy is at the top of your list, and the UK is somewhere on your list. Japan is performing particularly well among younger travelers, Gen Z and millennials. France is on the top 5 list of every generation except for the millennials who opt for Canada. Mexico appears across all the generational lists, but is missing from the baby boomers top 5. Boomers have Ireland and Spain on their list. All right, and for our final traveler segment profile, the foodie. Foodie and identifying as one staked a place in popular culture about 25 years ago, and is defined by Wikipedia as a person who has an ardent or refined interest in food and who eats food not only out of hunger, but also as a hobby. We've been tracking foodies in the State of the American Traveler for many years. So let's take a look back at the foodies of the past. In these upcoming charts, you'll see foodies noted as the darker blue bar, while other travelers are in the lighter blue. Even 13 years ago, before social media made food such content royalty, food was a big differentiator for foodies when it came to what was most important to their travel decisions. And here are some other characteristics of foodies back in 2010. Over 53% said a city with good restaurants was more attractive than one without. Nearly 47% said they would travel more than 50 miles one way to go to a specific restaurant. 22.6% said they would travel and stay overnight to go to a specific restaurant. And 16% said they made reservations for a restaurant before leaving on their trip. So going now to the present, currently 52% of American travelers are self-described foodies. This is up over 20 points since 2010, when under a third of American travelers called themselves foodies. Demographically, foodie travelers tend to skew younger, with half of foodie travelers falling into the Gen Z or millennial bucket, while more than 70% of other travelers are Gen X or baby boomers. Foodie travelers are also more likely to live in large cities and urban areas, and they are more ethnically diverse relative to other travelers. And while they, of course, love food, their interests are actually quite varied, with roughly half also saying their passions include visiting historical sites and attractions, going to musical concerts, going shopping, and international travel. So let's look at the financial wellness and anticipated travel spending of the American foodie. When asked how their financial situation is faring now compared to a year ago, a significantly larger proportion of foodie travelers, almost 37%, say they are better off now compared to the past year. Other travelers, just 24% of them saying that. They also have healthy optimism about their financial future, with 57% expecting to be better off financially a year from now. That's a nearly 15-point difference compared to other travelers. Despite feeling better off financially, a larger proportion of foodies say that recent inflation in consumer prices has still led them to cancel an upcoming trip. And that's actually 10 points higher compared to other travelers. And this foodie segment shows greater sensitivity to high travel prices, with just over half saying that this has kept them from traveling in the past month, compared to just 42% of other travelers saying the same. And while they may be sensitive to high travel prices, nearly a third of foodies still feel that right now is a great time to spend money on leisure travel. And a majority, nearly 60%, say they still plan to prioritize travel spending in their budgets in the next 3 months. So while high prices are giving this segment some pause, it's not putting a full stop on their travel spending. When asked how much in total they will spend on leisure travel in the next 12 months, foodies anticipate shelling out just over $3,600, which is $300 more on average compared to other travelers. And what does the travel outlook look like for the foodie? When asked if they expect to travel more or less for leisure in the next 12 months compared to the year prior, 1 in 3 say they expect to travel more, which is an 11-point difference compared to other travelers. And in terms of trip volume of the next year, foodies plan to take an average of 3.4 leisure trips in that time frame which is also higher relative to other travelers. And foodies are actively dreaming about travel, with over half having done so in the past week alone, much higher rate compared to other travelers. What about researching travel ideas online? 40% of foodies have done so in the last week alone, compared to just 29% of other travelers. So it's certainly an opportune time to target and message to this segment so they can consider spending that $3,600 travel budget in your destination or place of business. But we, of course, can't talk about foodies without honing in on their destination food preferences. Unsurprisingly, 55% say a destination's food scene is very or critically important to how they select the places they want to visit. Looking at affluent foodies who have an annual household income of 200K or more versus other foodies, a destination's food scene is considered even more important to their destination selection process. And when we break this statistic down by generation, younger foodies place more importance on this attribute compared to those in other generations. We also profiled foodies on their food-centric behaviors while traveling in the last 12 months, and nearly half of this segment has researched food experiences in the places they visited. Nearly 40% have also waited in line to try a well-known food item, and almost 30% have visited a brewery, and a quarter have visited a winery while traveling. Really importantly, a quarter also made reservations to a local restaurant before arriving in the destination, which we recall from my previous stat that it has increased significantly since 2010. The affluent segment of foodies, shown in the dark purple here, do even more planning and engage in food activities at an even higher rate during their trips. Over 56% researched food experiences prior to visiting, and nearly 40% made reservations at a local restaurant prior to arrival. Okay, all right, and we break out these planning and behavioral markers by generation. We see that Gen Zers over-index for engaging in drinking activities relative to older travelers. And taking a step back and looking at the whole of foodie travelers, we also see this segment is almost 3 times as likely than others to have specifically traveled to a destination, at least in part, to enjoy its craft beer scene in the past 2 years. And this rate is even higher among the affluent segment of foodies. 54.5% of them traveled for craft breweries. And to reinforce our earlier finding, again, when we break out this statistic by generation, Gen Zers are much more likely to have engaged in this craft brew visiting in the last 2 years. 50% of foodie travelers say visiting wine country regions and wineries is something they love to do while traveling, being wine tourists at nearly twice the rate of other travelers. And this affinity for wine tourism is even stronger among the affluent foodie, more than 2/3 of whom say visiting wine country regions and wineries is something they love to do while traveling. And despite the growing popularity of sober curiosity, as they come of age, Gen Z is also discovering a love for wine. 54.1% of Gen Z travelers say they love visiting wine country regions and wineries on their trips, outpacing all other generations. But perhaps the most unsurprising finding about foodies, they are more likely to share their food experiences on social media. Half of them say that if they have a fun or interesting food experience, they usually or always post pictures of it on social. And affluent foodies are even more likely to share about food on social. And younger generations of foodies post food to social more. 62.4% of Gen Z foodies say they usually or always post pics of their interesting food experiences on social. Indeed, food experiences are an essential part of travel for foodies. The majority of them enjoy learning about a travel destination's food history and culture, and say they are adventurous when it comes to food. 40% say they are up to date on food trends, and nearly 1/3 say they're willing to travel specifically for food experiences. Affluent foodies are especially keyed into food trends, with more than 55% saying that they stay up to date. But which generation of foodies do you think is most adventurous with food? Probably going to surprise you. It's actually our baby boomer foodies that say they are the most adventurous about food. Okay, so how do you travel marketers reach foodies? They're more receptive to messaging on social platforms and podcasts relative to other travelers. When asked to think about how travel destinations could best reach them with their messaging right now, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok were key for foodies, and they are almost twice as likely as other travelers to say podcasts. Foodies are also more inclined to utilize social media for travel and trip planning. About a third used Facebook and YouTube, over 28% used Instagram, and more than 1 in 5 used TikTok to plan their trips in the last year. And with this penchant for social content, they are more likely to turn to digital influencers. 26.4% report using a digital influencer for travel planning, more than double the rate of other travelers. They're more likely to look to online video to plan travel. 43.5% have done that to plan a trip recently. And even if the majority of them are not using podcasts for trip planning yet, many are certainly tuned in. 41.3% say they regularly listen to podcasts. Interestingly, they are more likely than other travelers to prefer podcasts about health and fitness, as well as travel specifically, although they do love a good comedy or pop culture podcast too. All right, so which destinations do American foodies have top of mind to visit in the coming year? Domestically, their top 5 list looks pretty similar to other travelers, but is more skewed towards California. In terms of the international destinations they want to visit, again, very similar to other travelers, with Italy, the UK, and France coming out on top. And finally, when asked to state in their own words, what is typically the single most important reason you travel for leisure? Remember, foodies are very much like the rest of us, driven to travel to relax, have fun, and eat some great food. Thank you so much for joining me on this current look at the affluent traveler, the foodie, and our 4 generations of traveling consumers. I hope this information is helpful to your planning and your overall understanding of your audiences and prospects. The State of the American Traveler is a treasure trove of information. So if me or Miles can provide you more, please feel welcome to reach out to us. I'll hand it back to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Erin. And thank you so much for doing those historic dives into those many years we've been collaborating on looking at all sorts of tourism, including food tourism. Now, we're just going to transition now to Eddie. And just a reminder before I pass over to Eddie Kirsch with Visit St. Pete Clearwater, we've written a blog on food tourism fundamentals. We had a look around the world at destinations that are doing leading things in terms of marketing, amplifying, and enhancing their food and cuisine scene. And that will be published by tomorrow and shared out with the resources from today. And we've actually got a question from Mary, who notes that they've gone from 0 tap rooms to 8 tap rooms. So I know Brian's going to have some critical insights to share on the whole craft brewery scene as well. But without further ado, let me invite Eddie Kirsch back. Eddie is now a digital producer at Visit St. Pete Clearwater, but he's got many years' experience at Visit Sarasota and Big Bear in other destination organizations. And Eddie's going to kick us off with an overview of the food and cuisine scene in St. Pete Clearwater and what they are doing around marketing and amplifying to foodie travelers and all travelers. So, Eddie, over to you, mate.
Well, thanks so much, Chris. And I would be remiss to say it's actually National Beer Lovers Day. So just a perfect segue to kind of tie into that. And we're so excited to be a part of this. First off, all that data and research is mouth-watering, pun intended. And we're really fortunate to work with Miles Partnership and future partners on a lot of different research and marketing initiatives. So really just looking forward to sharing, what we're doing. And hopefully my goal at the end of this is to make sure that everyone is hungry and find something delicious to eat this evening. So with that, let's see here. Okay. We don't exactly have, one source of data that we look at to see how the food sector is, or how the travel sector is affecting the food economy in our destination. We have a variety of different pieces of data and research. Future partners, we have our Intercept surveys, and they provide us some really great economic data to really show the impact of food. We also sort of support that data with some in-market credit card expenditure data that we work with Adara to sort of see and come across. And then we also have a number of tools to really sort of evaluate our marketing performance. Sprout Social and SEMrush kind of being a couple of those key things that we use. But from a marketing perspective, or from an economic impact perspective, this is our 2022 visitor profile spending, and you can see of the $6.7 billion that visitors spent in our economy last year, 2.1 billion of that was for restaurants. It was second only behind lodging. And we work with Adara to really see from our ad exposed, people who are exposed to our advertising through our marketing efforts. We track them and track their in-market credit card expenditures. So we've collected data from October 2022 to March 2023 of over 600,000 travelers who visited our destination. And we can see that about 40% of their in-market credit card expenditures were either for restaurants or food stores. That equates to about $70 million spent over that 6-month campaign period. And that's just what we observed from our marketing, from those ad exposed people who came and visited. So we really know that it's a huge factor for our destination. And when looking at some of the top restaurants in terms of the most credit card expenditures in market, these are all local places. So it helps us indicate that visitors aren't just going to, chain restaurants or things like that. They're actually going to local establishments. And we've been working with future partners for a while now and tracking, what percentage of our visitors are citing the food scene as an important decision to their visit. And really, since the pandemic, we've just continued to see this grow as a bigger and more important factor in people's decision to come and visit our destination. So kind of our strategy around food and really around our marketing in general is Beaches Plus. We have amazing beaches in St. Pete, Clearwater, but really it's that plus that helps define our destination. And one of the biggest items in there are the food and craft beer experiences that we have in our destination. I think, the Tampa Bay region has just the most breweries really in the state of Florida. And it's a big part of what we do. So we try to prioritize, dining and craft beer experiences through social media, through our website content. Can't stress this enough. We really try to lean into YouTube as kind of a free service to get our content, seen globally. And we also create passports and guides. But most importantly, we're working with partners to help expand and tell our story, which includes influencers, media publishers, local restaurants, and partners like Brian, who's on this call. And just kind of looking at how we evaluate the ROI on some of these things with social media. We don't need much more ROI than the comments that we receive. I love the "please God, get this in our bellies" comment. That's one of my favorites. But we see these comments and we get feedback from the restaurants. We get feedback from our stakeholders. We are able to share and provide this imagery to our restaurant partners. So it just really helps develop a relationship. And then we're able to go back to them with, other influencers that we bring into the market and journalists and media. And it really helps us kind of maintain that relationship by leaning forward with social. And from a website perspective, we know food is important. So we've put it really front and center on our website and, really tried to make it a visually engaging part of our website where people want to, look at this imagery and say, wow, I want to eat that, I want to visit this place. And we also try to stay at the forefront, when new things open up. So recently, their Three Daughters opened up a location out on Clearwater Beach. we wanted to be one of the first ones to kind of come and capture that scene and showcase it and really promote it. So we're always trying to work with partners and understanding what they've got, coming out the pipeline, so we can really take full advantage of integrating that stuff into our content plan. And then we just, we really emphasize trying to tell unique stories. So, we've I guess we just tried to diversify the things that we're doing from a YouTube perspective. So this, cheap meals story was actually a long form kind of episodic video. It won a Telly, which is exciting for us. And we're already looking at ways to kind of do a next episode for this, because, we just saw really great results from it the first time. And this was with assistance from Miles Partnerships, Odyssey Studios. And we lean towards influencers as well. So again, that's kind of building those relationships and maximizing the opportunity to have influencers in the area, capture photos with them and share that content, and making sure we're working with the right influencers. Giselle is an example of one we worked with recently who generated 29 posts, over 800,000 reached, and the thing I like is that 5-to-1 return on ad spend. So that's basically the earned media value that we saw from that versus the cost to host Giselle. And whenever we're building out our marketing plan, we're incorporating an element or two of the foodie scene. Most recently, we did a gastro guide with Atlas Obscura. And since launching, it got 45,000 views. It's done great. And we're already talking about how do we expand this and do more of this. And it's been a really fun product. We've seen a really great response there. And we try to create interactive products as well. Our Gulp Coast has been around for a while, but recently we sort of digitized this and created a mobile version of it, which really gave us some great feedback from the data perspective. We have nearly had 10,000 passes generated since launch, 27,000 redemptions. That's people going in and checking into these craft beer establishments, and over, almost 800 people visiting nearly 15 locations to win a free t-shirt. So you can see some really enthusiastic people about this product. And that's really all, the different tactics that we've been doing. And I'm so excited to also be working with Brian of Three Daughters and on various partnerships. They've been a great partner for us with all the requests that we've kind of sent their way. They always jump up and say yes and help us out, and really, are proactive about letting us know what they've got going on. So Chris, any comments or questions or anything?
No, I suggest let's jump over to Brian, and I'll come back to you, Eddie, once we get into some of the questions I'm going to be asking about how destination organizations like Visit St. Pete work with industry partners like Three Daughters Brewery. But Brian, we saw some great imagery of at least your new establishment. Is there anything you want to add in terms of describing to the audience, Three Daughters Brewing and what you do specifically around the visitor sector?
Sure, absolutely. So we're the second largest independent brewery in the state of Florida. We have 2 tap rooms and a bar. So our original tap room is in St. Petersburg, Florida. It's right by Tropicana Field. That one it's usually number 1 or number 2 in the state in terms of volume and tasting rooms. We'll get about 250,000 people through this one tasting room on an average non-COVID year. There is a small brewery called Anheuser-Busch in Jacksonville that beats us out every once in a while. So we go toe-to-toe the best we can with them. But we have a second location that we opened on Clearwater Beach. It's the only brewery on the beach in St. Petersburg that actually brews beer there. And then we had a third location opened inside of the St. Pete Clearwater Pie Airport, which that airport has saw every month they break a new record in terms of the amount of volume going through there. We distribute throughout the state of Florida. So we distribute everything from Sloppy Joe's in Key West up through New Smyrna Beach, Jacksonville, over to the Panhandle. So we work with our distributor partners throughout the state. And we are really a destination in terms of people are coming through. Both our locations are a little different. Our Clearwater location, approximately 80% of everybody that comes through that location is a visitor to the St. Pete Clearwater area. So very high transient numbers. Our St. Pete Clearwater location, we see about 30%, 30 to 33%. And obviously that swings with when we're in season, when we're out of season, when the Rays are playing, or when the Rays are playing the Yankees or the Red Sox, we get a much higher number, obviously. But so in terms of how we manage the traveler into the breweries is very important to us, because so much of what we do is dependent on tourism.
So and we might step out of the slides for now, and we can come back to them just with a couple of reminders at the end. But we saw some examples there of some of the marketing you're doing, Brian. What's the current sort of mix between locals versus visitors in terms of revenue through your establishments?
So like I said, about call it 85% of all revenue through our Clearwater location is from tourists, and about a third of revenue from our St. Pete location is from tourists. 100% of all the revenue we have through St. Pete Clearwater Airport is obviously because of tourists. But also how it affects us too, we're very keen on tourists, because if you look at what we define as beer that we send outside of our brewery, our number one account is Disney. Our next 5 largest accounts are all resorts throughout the state. So tourism really drives our business, not only in our tasting rooms, but what we sell, what we call distribution throughout the state of Florida.
So we saw some examples of your marketing. What are some of the most important ways you try to engage with visitors, and how do you assess the results or the success, the return on investment of where you spend money to reach visitors?
So for us, we call it liquid to lips. So the best that we can get beer in people's hands in terms of tastings, in terms of being out in front of them, we put a lot of effort into. So a very good example for us is we partner with Allegiant Airlines. We don't make any money selling beer to them, but we have a lot of people that fly into Florida on Allegiant Airlines, whether it's through St. Pete Clearwater or Sanford or down south in Port Charlotte. Once they land at the airport, they're also seeing our bar. They're seeing all the branding that goes along with it. And then, of course, we have a very huge social networking program. So we have the most social media followers of any independent brewery in the state of Florida. So we have a whole team here that we have one person that is dedicated solely to running social media programs and events that really are targeted to tourists. And what I mean by that is we really, really push events. So for our events, we might have dueling pianos, or we might have we'll do yoga in the morning with goats or something like that and get a free beer. I mean, we do a lot of different things. Silent disco. We'll take those and we'll advertise those on social media and through some other channels with partners like Visit St. Pete Clearwater to tourists that are, hey, if you're in town and you want to do something different and funky at a local brewery, here's an option for you.
Very good. And Eddie, just quickly back to you. How do you typically reach out to industry partners to include them in marketing initiatives around food tourism? And what sort of reporting are you currently doing, or do you plan to do, to sort of demonstrate results?
Yeah, I think that there's a number of touch points throughout the year that we try to work with our partners. So we always launch a co-op marketing program in November, and then we also have different initiatives that will oftentimes just do a blanket outreach to partners to try to be as inclusive as possible. So that generally comes through email or things like that. But then oftentimes we really value the relationships that we've built throughout the years, and there's unique opportunities all the time where we know Three Daughters, for example, or another craft brewery is going to be an excellent fit for that. So it's really just about working with them and sometimes supporting their initiatives, so then they'll sometimes support our initiatives and kind of have that the togetherness in the relationship, if that makes sense.
Very good. And Brian, obviously you've got lots of ways in which you can spend your marketing and advertising dollars. I'm sure You know, you're constantly being contacted by all sorts of media and advertising channels. How do you assess the different opportunities, and what do you look for from, say, Visit St. Pete Clearwater that would be
Yeah.
applicable potentially across other destinations, in terms of, you know, how destination organizations need to be able to present their opportunities to someone like you to make it compelling?
So it's touch points, and especially, and what I mean by touch points, it's being able to touch the visitor, not necessarily in a magazine or online. But what's really important to us is trying to either get us out to an event that is happening in the local area. So one of the absolute best programs that we do, and this is led by Visit St. Pete Clearwater, is they have a fly-in day at the St. Pete Clearwater Airport. So they'll bring, you can correct me, but it's usually 10 to 15 vendors, and we'll set up in baggage claim, and we'll have people come in. We'll hand out beers, or samples of beers, I should say. We'll hand out bounce backs to the brewery. And that is, those type of things are in this environment are absolutely critical, and do an amazing job, because number one, we're actually interacting with the guest. Number two is we're able to track that very easily. So it's very simple to say, hey, we spent 4 hours at the airport giving away this much beer. It cost us this much in labor, and we gave away this much in discount. And here are the number of people that came in. So from an ROI standpoint, it's very easy and very clear for us to define that. Another thing that does really well for us with St. Pete Clearwater, or Visit St. Pete Clearwater, is their gulp port, or their gulp pass, which he spoke about earlier, and that is really something where people can buy a passport, and then they go around the different multiple breweries. And I think what's different from our standpoint is we don't find ourselves in competition with other breweries, and I think that's what's different about our industry than most, is we really encourage people to come in here. If you come into our brewery, we have a map the first thing that walks into and says, here are the other 9 breweries that you can walk to in our area. We please encourage you to go visit them. So from that standpoint, we really try to look at it as a rising tide, lifts all ships with all the other breweries. So anything that we can do to promote our craft scene, we really feel helps not only promote our business, but St. Pete Clearwater as a destination for craft brewing.
So I want to jump back real quick, because there's a couple of things that I think Brian said that are really great points. One of it being, we have a pretty robust activations effort, actually, that is a lot within our own destination. So we do assist with a number of different events, like a craft beer event out at our St. Pete Pier and things like that. So again, it gives opportunities for us to be seen by those business partners, to be out there, and to really kind of continue to establish that relationship. And then the other thing too is, I think we're very fortunate that we have 3 daughters. We have Green Bench Brewing. We have these breweries that are also creating their own events. And then we can kind of come in and say, okay, how can we as the Visitors Bureau support their efforts? It's not just that we have to be the ones creating the efforts. It's also kind of listening to our partners and seeing how we can really just support them.
Thank you so much, Eddie, and thank you so much, Brian. Some critical insights there, and I invite everybody to have a look at the work that Visit St. Pete Clearwater are doing. It'll be linked from the blog as well as in the other resources we'll send out from today. And I hope we can come and enjoy the great food and craft beer scene in St. Pete Clearwater. And a shout out to Mary. Mary asked a question about, I think it's Gilroy, she didn't say, but I believe it's Gilroy, California, has now got 8 tap rooms just south of San Jose there. So another destination to head to. Just a reminder, we'll be working again with future partners on our 4th quarterly edition. We've been again doing this for many years, our Destination Management and Sustainable Travel edition. That's on November 7th. So please register for that. We've got a great lineup of guest speakers looking at how American travelers think about sustainability and what it means both in terms of the community and the natural environment, and how that's shaping their travel decisions. So thank you to our speakers, to Aaron, to Eddie, to Brian, and most importantly to all of you for joining us today. We hope to connect with you soon at an industry event or at our next webinar on November 7th. Have a great rest of your day.